Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Judd Leinhard, founder of the Mass Method, former Army Ranger and college linebacker. I've been a speed and performance coach for over 15 years. Today, I'm at the First Form HQ up here in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm going to share with you guys the 10 things I did that finally grew my legs. I'm not blessed with natural genetics when it comes to leg growth and size. I'm kind of a taller dude. Growing up in high school, I didn't have overly impressive legs. They were strong enough and I was a good athlete, but it took me a long time, even after my bodybuilding career, before my legs became arguably my strongest body part. And what happened was in my early 30s, I really had to stop and reassess some things because up until that point, I was working legs kind of the typical way, which is one leg day a week, so kind of infrequent, very heavy loads, overly focused on the compound lifts, and then I would just kind of barely touch on some of the accessory stuff. And I had to really stop and readdress how I was training legs. So today I'm gonna go over the 10 things that I did to grow my legs, 5 of which are more philosophical in nature, and then I'm gonna go over 5 exercises or exercise categories specifically that I worked on to grow my legs. So let's get going. Okay, so the first one is more frequency. Frequency just refers to the times of week or the times during your microcycle which you do the leg workout or the workout you're in question. So like most of you out there, I had my leg day once a week. And what would happen was, since it was only once a week, I would push really hard. I would go really heavy. I'd be sore for 4 to 5 days, almost so sore that it would affect other aspects of my life. And then I would have 3 days where I probably could have done legs again, but I didn't because I only had one leg day a week. So the first thing I changed was I started to simply do my legs more often. So I started to do an actual leg workout once every 4 to 5 days instead of once every 7 days. And that way, if I missed a leg workout or I wanted to cut back on a bit of the intensity or spend more time in the prep, it wasn't a big deal because I knew I had another leg workout coming up that week. So the biggest change I think I made was I simply started doing my legs more often. Okay, so the second thing I did, which is related to the first, is I stopped babying my legs. And what I mean by that is I didn't just start doing legs more often. I stopped worrying about hitting my legs or doing other things involving my legs that weren't on my leg day. So a lot of us, I feel like we do our leg workout and then we feel like we have to let them recover and we stay away from other forms of activity or exercises that involve our legs at all. I just stopped worrying about it. So if I wanted to go do some hang cleans or some heavy rows where I had to use my hamstrings and glutes or go out and run or jump or sprint, I went ahead and did that anyway. And yes, for a while, my legs were very fatigued, but your legs can adapt. And I found that not worrying about it and giving them a stimulus on days that weren't just my leg day not only helped them recover, but it helped them grow as well. Okay, so the third thing I did, and doing the first 2 things makes this third thing easier because you don't feel like you have to cram so much in the same workout. I started to focus more on the prep. I took my time, I made sure my tissues were ready, and then I eased into the working loads in a much more deliberate fashion. So I didn't feel like I had to get the same amount of working volume in on each leg day because I knew I had another leg day coming up, and I knew that I was going to do other things during that week that would also work my legs even if it wasn't a traditional leg day. So especially as I got older, focusing on prep and keeping my tissues healthy and preparing my nervous system, getting my mind right going into the workout really was a game changer for me. So that's 3. Okay, so the fourth thing I did was I started to really take care of my CNS. It's okay to really punish the tissues, and that does have an effect on my CNS, but I really had to do a calculation on how much load I wanted to use systemically that would fatigue my CNS and prevent recovery or hinder recovery into the next leg workout. That doesn't mean I stayed away from those activities, but I really was smarter about how I did it, and I backed off on some of the volume of the heavy loading. I still got really good quality heavy loading. I just didn't do as much of it, and I did a lot more of my work in the 60 to 80% rep range. Higher reps focused more on quality of movement and tension, things that didn't tear down my CNS. And then the working volume of the very heavy stuff was lower, but it was very quality stuff more frequently throughout the week. So that is a big deal. If we go in and we try to crush it with heavy loads too frequently, it's gonna really tax our CNS or overload our CNS, and it's gonna keep us from being in our parasympathetic system throughout the week, and it's gonna hinder our recovery. So I really started, even though I punished my tissues, I stopped babying my legs, I started to baby my CNS. The fifth thing I did that really was a game changer in my leg growth was I started to focus on tension, not just load. Now, I do know that load is one way to generate tension, but you can generate tension in a lot of ways that don't involve load. So muscles require a high degree of mechanical tension in order to grow. There's no way around that. But that doesn't mean we always have to be picking up heavy weights, putting heavy weights in our shoulders, really taxing our system and taxing our joints. There are ways to do leverage and manipulate speed of movement that will result in a high degree of muscular tension without a high degree of loading on our axis, on our long axis, on our spine, and a high degree of loading that our CNS is gonna have to tolerate. So the first 5 on a philosophical, more frequency, I stop babying my legs, I focus way more on prep, I baby my CNS, and then I focus more on tension and not just loading the muscles. So now we're gonna get more into the specific exercises and types of exercises I did that really grew my legs. Okay, the first of the exercises or group of exercises that I really started to employ were Nordics, Nordic variations, and glute ham raises. So the reason for this is almost all the dudes out there, we focus too much on bilateral movements. We focus way too much on our quadriceps. The leg, if you look at the leg, is made up of the upper leg, a lot more musculature than just the quadriceps. And a lot of things make a leg look big and strong that if you look at it has nothing to do with the 4 quad muscles. And I started to realize that the hamstring movements I was doing that did involve heavy axial loading like RDLs and deadlifts were too light in nature and didn't have the degree of mechanical tension I needed to really grow the back and inside of my legs. So I started doing a lot more volume and a lot more tension by employing Nordic hamstring curls, glute ham raises, and bent knee hip extensions. So those 3 things really became the bread and butter of my hamstring work. And a lot more of my energy and volume started to be placed into those rather than the systemic lifts like deadlifts and RDLs and things like that, which are very important. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those. I still do those to this day, and I still do those heavy. I don't do them with the same amount of volume or frequency anymore. A lot more of my volume and frequency are single joint movements. They put a lot of tension in the hamstring muscle. I feel like they grow really well that way without a big systemic effect. So you can stack on a lot more volume that will result in a lot more muscle growth without tearing down your system. So the 7th thing I did, I really started to focus on unilateral or pseudo-unilateral movements. So I'm not talking about just pistol squats and things like that, but pseudo-unilateral, like Bulgarian split squats and walking lunges. Those are 2 of my favorite bread and butter exercises. But that doesn't rule out things like heavy step-ups. It doesn't rule out things like front foot elevated rear lunges. Any kind of heavy unilateral movement, I started to employ a lot more in my workouts, and I started to focus on those earlier in my workouts. So a lot of times what we do, we'll start every leg workout with a heavy bilateral squatting movement. Whether that's a back squat, a safety bar squat, a front squat, it's always a heavy bilateral quad movement. So what I started to do was I started to alternate my workouts. One workout, I would warm up and prep, but my main movement would be some form of unilateral movement, like a Bulgarian or a walking lunge. And I would really start to push the weight on those and see how much I could do safely. That day, my second movement would be a higher rep, more of a pump quad movement. And then that second workout of the week or of the phase, I would just flip it. My first movement would be a heavy bilateral squatting type movement in like the 4 to 10 rep range. And then my second movement would be a lighter weight, higher rep unilateral movement. So I really started to focus a lot more on the unilaterals, and it blew my legs up. It's a much more complete way to work your upper leg than a squat, which squats are fantastic, but this gets your vastus lateralis more, it gets your adductors more, and it incorporates more glutes and hamstrings. So unilaterals are very important. Okay, the 8th thing I did was I started to incorporate lateral movements like Cossacks or side lunges, but a lot of Cossacks. And if you really look at the upper leg, a big proportion of that upper thigh muscle is the adductor magnus, or the inside of the thigh. So if you look at dudes with big thighs, they have big inner thighs. And squats do work your adductor magnus, especially if you're squatting deep. But you need a little bit more volume for them. And just sitting down and doing those yes-no machines, it's not really the most optimal way. Cossacks work your adductors really well. They also get your glutes and your medial glutes. They work your quads in a different way. They are a great workout, and I do all varieties of Cossacks. So I'll use a dumbbell, I'll do them like a Zercher Cossack, but at least once a week, one of those 2 weekly leg workouts, you're gonna see me doing some version of Cossacks. And kind of like with the strategy I employ with my quads, I'll kind of alternate. So one of those workouts, I'll go fairly heavy, which you'll see in today in the clips, 225 up to 275, sets of 4 to 6 per side. And then the other day will be maybe a dumbbell, a much lighter load with a slightly bigger range of motion and much higher reps. So I alternate those as well. But these really help to fill out my upper thigh. Okay, the 9th out of the 10 things I did was I started to do a lot more hip extension that wasn't axial loaded. So what I mean by that, right now, a lot of dudes, if they're good at working their glutes and hamstrings at all, they're gonna do some type of deadlifting or RDL, all right? A lot of dudes don't even do enough of that. But I found that I needed more volume than what I could get from that without tearing down my central nervous system. So while I'll still do the deadlifts and the RDLs and things like that, I do a lot more of my volume of hip extension with like a Roman chair or a glute ham device or something like that, where I can get more volume and more tension, once again, without loading my spine. Especially as we get older, this is very important in order to sustain the leg growth. And I do put in the RDLs heavy, and I'm still very strong at that movement, but as my training age has gotten greater, I don't need the same amount of volume or frequency of picking up the heavy weight that I did when I was younger, nor can I tolerate that. Okay, the quadricep muscle group is a very interesting muscle group because most of its fibers are fairly flexible. What I mean by that is they can shift from fast twitch to slower twitch to the type 2X in the middle a little bit more. So you can train the muscles of the quads to kind of encompass a wide range of muscle fiber types. Now, what we tend to do because of that, we can make our quads really strong, but we tend not to hit all the muscle fibers by doing that. So what dudes tend to do once they get into lifting weights, they tend to gravitate more to strictly the 3 to 8 rep range with our squats. Because for one, high rep squats are pretty miserable, so we tend to shy away from those. High rep squats also don't develop strength very well. So by sticking with the lower rep range, we tend to get fairly large quads and very strong quads, which is good for athletes. But if you want to optimize leg size, what I found was doing every other workout in the higher rep range for my quadriceps really grew my quads, because quads love a lot of blood. They love a lot of reps and the time under tension. I know it's a controversial subject, but they need a higher frequency and a higher volume of your weightlifting at a lower load percentage for higher reps. And another thing that will do, it'll enable you to keep growing your quads without really tearing down your tendons, especially as you get older, because if every leg workout you do is in a high percentage of your 1 rep max, your tendons are going to start to get really angry with you. So I still do, you'll see it on my other social media platforms, you'll still see me doing very heavy hack squats, very heavy back squats, very heavy zerchers, but you'll also see me doing at least once every other workout, very high rep hack squats, very high rep leg extensions. So if there's one muscle group I really do a lot of like high repetitions with, it's the quads. And once I started to do that, the whole Tom Platz thing with sets of 15 to 20 on occasion, my quads really started to get bigger in a hurry. So this is what I did to grow my legs. If you guys got any questions or feedback, feel free to leave those in the comments. If there's any other videos that you want to see based on things that you're interested, let me know in the comments as well, and I'll hit that up. Make sure you hit the notification button so you know when a new video drops. Make sure you hit subscribe, rate, and review. Hope this helped a little bit, guys, and I'll see you soon.